At 2:17 a.m. on an unremarkable Tuesday, Michael Barnes believed his biggest worry was making rent. The 42-year-old Uber driver had $47 left in his account, a past he could never quite outrun, and a night shift that seemed intent on grinding him down. He had no idea the next 47 minutes would shatter everything he thought he knew. An ordinary man would be pushed toward an extraordinary choice: risk everything to save 6 strangers suspended over a 150-foot drop, or surrender to the ghosts that had haunted him for years. But the truth was far darker than Michael could imagine, because the night wasn't just about an earthquake. It was about a secret buried deep enough to shake the ground beneath him, and the revelation that would change not only his life, but theirs forever.
Quick pause. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing.
Michael Barnes gripped the steering wheel of his Honda Accord as another wave of exhaustion washed over him. The digital clock on his dashboard glowed mockingly. 2:17 a.m. 14 hours into what was supposed to be a quick evening shift, and he had exactly $47 to show for it. Not even enough to cover his son Danny's therapy session tomorrow. 3 years ago, Michael had been someone else entirely. Paramedic Michael Barnes, they called him at Station 19. The guy who could keep his cool when a severed artery painted the ambulance walls red. The one who talked jumpers down from bridges and breathed life back into hearts that had given up. That Michael died on a rain-soaked highway outside Phoenix, watching a 7-year-old girl slip away despite everything he knew, everything he tried. Now he was just another failed middle-aged man driving strangers around a city that didn't care if he lived or died. His phone buzzed against the cup holder. Another ride request. Michael stared at the notification for a long moment, considering whether he had the energy for one more fare. The pickup location was downtown, near Phoenix General Hospital. The destination was listed as a residential address in Scottsdale, a 20-minute drive that might finally push his daily earnings past the $100 mark. He accepted the ride. The pickup spot was a 24-hour diner that looked like it had been serving coffee and broken dreams since the 1960s. Under the flickering neon sign that read, "Mel's All Night Eats," a woman in scrubs stood checking her phone. She looked to be in her mid-30s, with the kind of tired that went deeper than a single sleepless night. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she clutched a thermos coffee cup like it contained the secret to survival. Michael pulled up to the curb and rolled down his window. "Amanda?" She looked up and nodded, then climbed into the back seat with the practice efficiency of someone who had taken countless ride shares after exhausting shifts. As she settled in, Michael caught a glimpse of her hospital ID badge. Amanda Foster, RN, ICU. "Long mate?" Michael asked, pulling away from the curb. 16 hours, she replied, her voice carrying the weight of whatever she had witnessed. "Lost 2 patients today, saved 3. I guess that's supposed to be a win." Michael knew that math all too well. He had played the same numbers game once, back when he believed he could tip the scales in favor of life. Now he just drove in circles, literally and metaphorically. "I used to work in emergency medicine," he found himself saying. "It's a hell of a job." "Used to?" "Career change." The lie came easily. It was cleaner than explaining how he'd fallen apart, how the weight of every life he couldn't save had eventually crushed the part of him that believed he could make a difference. Amanda leaned back against the headrest and closed her eyes. She fell asleep in the back seat, her breathing deep and regular. Michael envied her ability to find rest anywhere. Sleep had become elusive for him ever since Phoenix, interrupted with dreams of sirens and small hands going limp in his. The radio was playing some late-night talk show, the host's voice a low murmur discussing conspiracy theories about government cover-ups. Michael only half listened, his attention focused on navigating the construction zone safely. The last thing he needed was to damage his car on a concrete barrier. The repair costs would wipe out weeks of earnings. As they approached the highest point of the overpass, Michael noticed something odd. The usual array of construction lights was dark, and there seemed to be some kind of equipment malfunction ahead. Yellow warning lights flashed in an irregular pattern, and he could see what looked like loose debris scattered across the roadway. He was still trying to process what he was seeing when the world exploded into chaos. The earthquake hit with a sudden, violent intensity of a freight train derailment. The entire bridge structure lurched sideways, throwing Michael against his door as his hands fought to maintain control of the steering wheel. The sound was undescribable, a deep, grinding roar that seemed to come from the earth itself, mixed with the sharp crack of concrete and the screech of twisting metal. Amanda jolted awake in the back seat, her nurse's training immediately assessing the situation even as the car bucked and swayed like a ship in a storm. "What's happening?" "Earthquake!" Michael shouted over the noise as his foot found the brake pedal as the road ahead disintegrated. The bridge section directly in front of them collapsed in slow motion, massive concrete slabs peeling away from the support structure and tumbling toward the river below. But they weren't alone. What Michael saw in those first seconds after the earthquake would have been terrifying enough, but it was what he heard next that changed everything. Because someone was calling his name from the wreckage. Someone who knew exactly who he was.
As the dust began to settle and the violent shaking subsided, Michael's paramedic training kicked in, despite 3 years of rust. His first priority was immediate assessment. He was alive, Amanda was conscious and moving, and his car was stable on solid roadway. But the scene ahead of them was a nightmare. 4 vehicles had been caught in the collapse. 2 cars and a pickup truck hung at impossible angles from twisted rebar and broken concrete, suspended over the abyss like toys in a demolished playhouse. The 4th vehicle, a red SUV, had partially fallen through the bridge deck, but was somehow wedged between 2 concrete support beams, its occupants trapped inside. Michael's hands shook as he reached for his phone to call 911, muscle memory from his paramedic days taking over. But before he could dial, he heard it. "Michael! Michael Barnes!" The voice came from the red SUV, impossibly clear despite the distance and chaos. It was a man's voice, authoritative and familiar, though Michael couldn't immediately place it. Amanda was already out of the car, her medical training overriding any concern for her own safety. "We have to help them," she called back to Michael. "The structure could collapse completely at any moment." Michael forced himself out of the driver's seat, his legs unsteady. The voice called his name again, and this time he recognized it. Captain Rick Santos, from Station 19, his old fire department partner, the man who had tried to talk him out of quitting after the Phoenix incident. "Rick?" Michael called out, moving carefully toward the edge of the collapsed section. "Rick Santos?" "Michael, thank God!" The response confirmed his worst fear. Of all the people who could be trapped in this disaster, it had to be someone who knew his history, someone who might expect him to be the hero he used to be. Michael could see Rick now, trapped in the driver's seat of the SUV, his left leg clearly pained by twisted metal. But Rick wasn't alone. Through the cracked windshield, he could make out at least 2 other figures in the vehicle. "How many people?" asked Amanda, appearing at Michael's side with a small medical kit she'd had retrieved from somewhere. "At least 6 in total," Michael replied, his paramedic assessment skills automatically cataloging the scene. 2 adults and what looks like a child in the sedan hanging off the left side. An elderly couple in the pickup truck. The man is unconscious, possible head trauma. The woman is responsive, but I think her arm is broken. It was exactly the kind of triage report Rick would give, professional and thorough, despite his own dire situation. Michael felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders, the same pressure that had eventually broken him 3 years ago. But this time was different. This time he wasn't alone. "What do you need?" Amanda asked, and Michael realized he was talking to him, not Rick. She was looking at him with the expectation that he would take charge, that he would know what to do. "Rope," Michael said, his mind automatically shifting into emergency response mode. "I've got emergency gear in my trunk, road flares, basic first aid, and a tow rope. It's not climbing gear, but it might work." As he moved toward his car, his brain was already working through the logistics. The tow rope was rated for 3,000 pounds, enough to support a person's weight,
but not with much margin for error. The distance to the nearest trapped vehicle was about 20 feet, mostly vertical. Doable, if he could find secure anchor points. What he couldn't figure out was the timing. Even working as efficiently as possible, evacuating 6 people one at a time would take at least 30 minutes, and that was assuming the structure held, the weather cooperated, and nothing went wrong. Amanda was already at the edge of the collapse, calling out to the trapped victims, getting medical information. She was good, professional, reassuring, the kind of bedside manner that kept people calm in crisis situations. The little girl in the sedan, she's asking for her daddy. I think the man in the front seat might be unconscious, she called back to Michael. Michael popped his trunk and stared at his emergency kit. It seemed pathetically inadequate for what they were facing. A 50-foot tow rope, road flares, a basic first aid kit, emergency water, and a flashlight. Not exactly specialized rescue equipment, but it was what they had. He was securing the rope around his car's trailer hitch when Amanda appeared beside him. Michael, there's something else, something strange. What? The license plate on that red SUV, your friend Rick's car, is not a civilian plate, it's government. Michael looked up from his knot tying. Rick's been fire department his whole career, maybe it's a city vehicle. No, Amanda said, shaking her head. I mean federal government. And there's something else. I got a better look at the people in his car. One of them is wearing a suit at 2:30 in the morning during an earthquake response. Before Michael could process what that might mean, Rick's voice cut through the night again. But this time, what he said made Michael's blood run cold. Michael, the briefcase in my passenger seat. If something happens to me, you need to get it to Agent Morrison at the FBI field office. Tell him Code Red is compromised. Tell him Phoenix wasn't an accident. The Phoenix incident that destroyed Michael's career wasn't an accident. And the earthquake that brought them all together tonight, that might not be natural either. Suddenly, this rescue mission had become something else entirely.
Michael's hands froze on the rope as Rick's words hit him. Phoenix wasn't an accident. The incident that had haunted his nightmares for 3 years, the failure that had driven him from emergency medicine, the death of 7-year-old Sarah Martinez on that rain-soaked highway. It wasn't the tragic accident he'd believed it to be. What did he just say? Amanda asked. But Michael was already moving, his mind racing through implications he wasn't ready to face. I have to get down there, he said, checking his knots one final time. I have to talk to Rick. Michael, wait! Amanda caught his arm. If what your friend just said is true, if this involves federal agents and some kind of conspiracy, then we might be in more danger than just a structural collapse. She was right, of course, but 6 people were still hanging over a 150-foot drop, and among them was the one person who might finally have answers to questions that had been eating Michael alive for 3 years. Michael secured the rope around his waist and began his descent. The twisted metal and broken concrete created a treacherous path, but his old training served him well. Years of rappelling into accident scenes had taught him how to navigate unstable terrain. As he got closer to Rick's SUV, he could see the situation more clearly. Rick was indeed trapped, his left leg pinned between the seat and a piece of dashboard that had been crushed inward. But he was conscious and alert, which was more than could be said for one of his passengers. The man in the suit that Amanda had noticed was slumped forward, blood trickling from a head wound. In the back seat, a woman in professional attire was conscious, but appeared to be in shock. She kept repeating something under her breath that Michael couldn't quite make out. "Rick?" Michael called as he reached the vehicle. "Are you hurt anywhere besides the leg?" "I'm fine," though his face was pale with pain. "Michael, listen to me carefully. We don't have much time and there are things you need to know." "What's in the briefcase, Rick, and what did you mean about Phoenix?" Rick's eyes darted toward his unconscious passenger, then back to Michael. "Agent David Morrison, FBI. The woman in back is Dr. Sarah Chen, seismologist with the U.S. Geological Survey. We were on our way back from a meeting when the earthquake hit." "A meeting? About what?" "About preventing this earthquake, Michael. About stopping the people who caused it." The words hit Michael like a physical blow. "Caused it? You can't cause an earthquake, Rick. That's impossible." 3 years ago, you responded to what you thought was a car accident on Highway 60, the Martinez family. Do you remember the unusual circumstances? Michael's throat tightened. Of course he remembered. It was burned into his memory with perfect, horrible clarity. The car had gone off the road for no apparent reason. No skid marks, no evidence of mechanical failure, no sign of another vehicle. The father was unconscious at the wheel, the mother was dead on impact, and Sarah... He couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah Martinez, 7 years old, had survived the initial crash but died while Michael was trying to save her. Massive internal injuries, too much damage, not enough time. The father, Miguel Martinez, wasn't just a random accident victim. He was a geologist working on a classified project involving induced seismicity, the deliberate triggering of earthquakes using hydraulic fracturing techniques. That's fracking, Rick. That causes minor tremors, not major earthquakes. Not with the technology Miguel was developing. His research focused on precisely targeted fault activation using a combination of chemical injection and sonic resonance. It was theoretical, designed to help predict and prevent natural disasters. The woman in the back seat suddenly looked up, her shock seeming to clear. "But someone stole his research," she said, her voice steady despite their circumstances. "Someone killed him for it, made it look like an accident, and has been using his work to artificially trigger seismic events." Michael's world tilted on its axis. "Dr. Chin, I presume?" She nodded. "I've been tracking unusual seismic patterns for the past 2 years, Mr. Barnes. Tonight's earthquake wasn't natural. It was specifically designed to target this bridge at this time to eliminate the 3 of us." "That's insane," Michael said, but even as the words left his mouth, he was remembering details from the Phoenix incident that never made sense. The strange equipment found in Miguel Martinez's car, the way the investigation had quickly been closed despite unanswered questions, the fact that Miguel's research files had disappeared from his university office within days of his death. Agent Morrison groaned and began to regain consciousness, his hand immediately going to his jacket pocket. "The evidence," he mumbled. "Did we save the evidence?" Rick gestured toward the briefcase wedged between the front seats. "It's all there, David. Miguel's original research, the names of the people who stole it, financial records, showing payments to geological survey teams, everything we need to prove that someone has been weaponizing earthquake technology." "But why target you 3? Why tonight?" "Because tomorrow morning we were supposed to testify before a congressional committee. We had enough evidence to expose the entire operation and identify the people responsible for at least 6 artificially triggered disasters over the past 3 years, including Phoenix, including the death of the Martinez family, including the guilt that had destroyed Michael's career and his faith in his ability to save lives." Above them, Amanda's voice carried down from the bridge. "Michael, the structure is shifting. You need to get them out now." Michael looked at the 3 people trapped in the SUV, then at the other vehicles hanging precariously from the collapsed bridge. 6 lives that needed saving, and now he understood that their deaths would be more than just a tragic accident. They would be murders designed to cover up a conspiracy that had already killed dozens of innocent people. The weight of responsibility felt familiar, but this time it came with something else: purpose. For 3 years he had believed that Sarah Martinez's death was his failure, his inability to save a life that should have been saved. Now he knew the truth. He hadn't failed Sarah. He had been set up to fail by people who had already killed her father and destroyed her family. "Rick, I need you to stay calm and help me coordinate this evacuation," Michael said, his paramedic training taking full control. "Dr. Chin, are you injured?" "Bruised ribs, possible concussion, but mobile." "Agent Morrison?" "Concussion definitely, possible internal bleeding, but I can move if necessary." Michael began untying the rope around his waist. "We're getting everyone out, but we're doing it smart. Dr. Chin first. She's the most mobile and can help Amanda coordinate topside. Then Agent Morrison. Rick, you're last because you're trapped, but also because I need you to help guide the others." As he secured the rope around Dr. Chin's waist, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years: the absolute certainty that he was going to save lives tonight. All of them. Not because he was a hero, but because sometimes ordinary people find themselves in extraordinary situations where doing the right thing was the only option. But as Dr. Chin began her ascent to safety, Michael noticed something that changed everything. Again, the briefcase that contained all their evidence, it was handcuffed to Agent Morrison's wrist, and Morrison had just gone unconscious again, his pulse growing weaker by the minute. If he died,
The truth died with him.
Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Michael stared at the handcuff connecting Agent Morrison to the briefcase as Dr. Chen disappeared over the edge of the collapsed bridge. The FBI agent's breathing was shallow and irregular, classic signs of internal bleeding and deteriorating condition. If Morrison died while still handcuffed to the evidence, the conspiracy that had killed the Martinez family and caused tonight's earthquake would remain buried forever. "Rick," Michael said urgently, "do you have keys for those handcuffs?" Rick shook his head, his face grimacing with pain. "Standard FBI protocol. Agent Morrison would have the only key. It's probably in his jacket pocket." Michael carefully searched Morrison's jacket, finding a wallet, a phone, and a small key ring. But when he tried the keys on the handcuffs, none of them fit. These weren't standard law enforcement cuffs. They were some kind of specialized security restraints. "Biometric lock," Morrison mumbled, briefly regaining consciousness. "Fingerprint, scanner on the side." Michael found the small scanner built into the cuff mechanism. Morrison's thumb was slick with blood, but the scanner still registered his print and released the lock with a soft click. "Thank God," Michael breathed, securing the briefcase to his own belt. "Okay, Morrison, you're next." But as Michael began securing the rope around the injured agent, Amanda's voice called down with panic in her tone. "Michael, we have company up here." Michael looked up to see the silhouettes of at least 3 figures moving along the intact portion of the bridge. They weren't rescue workers. They moved with the purposeful stealth of people who didn't want to be seen. "Rick," Michael whispered, "did anyone else know about your meeting tonight?" "Only the congressional committee members." And Rick's eyes widened with realization. "Someone leaked our location. That's how they knew exactly when and where to trigger the earthquake." The sound of vehicles arriving on the bridge above confirmed their worst fears. These weren't rescuers. They were the people responsible for the artificial earthquake, coming to ensure there were no survivors to tell the tale. Michael's mind raced through our options. Getting Morrison to the top would take several minutes, and the FBI agent was in no condition to escape on foot even if they made it. Dr. Chen was already up there, presumably hidden, but also potentially trapped. The other trapped civilians, the family with a 5-year-old girl, and the elderly couple, they were all sitting ducks for anyone who wanted to eliminate witnesses. Change of plans, Michael decided. "Morrison, can you stay conscious long enough to give me the key information from that briefcase?" "The financial records, account numbers, payment schedules, it's all digital conspiracy." "Who's behind it?" "Cascade Industries, energy company. CEO named Harrison Webb, been buying earthquake triggers to clear land for fracking operations." Dr. Chen's voice drifted down from above, barely audible. "Michael, they're searching for us. At least 4 men, possibly armed." Michael made a decision that would have been impossible 3 years ago. Instead of evacuating Morrison first, he was going to leave the injured agent protected in the SUV while he rescued the other civilians. The briefcase and its evidence would stay hidden until the immediate threat passed. "Rick, I need you to take care of Morrison. Keep him stable, keep him conscious if possible. I'm going after the family and the elderly couple first." "Michael, that's tactically insane," Rick protested. "You're putting the most important witnesses at risk." "No, I'm being a paramedic. First priority is always the most vulnerable patients. That little girl and that unconscious elderly man can't protect themselves. Morrison and Dr. Chen can hide if they have to." Michael began making his way toward the sedan containing the family. The vehicle was suspended at a dangerous angle, held in place by a single piece of twisted rebar that was slowly bending under the weight. As he got closer, he could see the situation more clearly. The father was unconscious, slumped over the steering wheel with a significant head wound. The mother was conscious but appeared to have a broken collarbone. And in the back seat, 5-year-old Emma Chen was crying softly, her left arm bent at an unnatural angle. "Hey there, Emma," Michael said softly as he reached the car. "My name is Michael. I'm here to help you and your parents get out of this scary place." "Is Mommy going to be okay?" Emma asked, her voice small and frightened. "Your mommy is very brave and she's going to be fine. But I need you to be brave too. Can you do that for me?" Michael quickly assessed the family's injuries and the vehicle's stability. The car could give way at any moment, but moving the unconscious father would be extremely dangerous without proper spinal immobilization equipment. The sound of voices from above was getting closer. He could make out fragments of conversation, no survivors, and make it look accidental. He had to move fast. "Ma'am," Michael addressed Emma's mother, "I'm going to get Emma out first, then come back for you and your husband. The car is not stable, so I need you to stay as still as possible." Michael secured the rope around Emma's small body, creating a makeshift harness that would keep her safe during the ascent. As he lifted her from the back seat, she wrapped her uninjured arm around his neck. "I'm scared," she whispered. "That's okay. Being scared means you're paying attention. That's smart." The climb back to the bridge with Emma was harrowing. Every gust of wind made them sway, and I could hear the stressed metal groaning beneath our weight. But Amanda was there to receive Emma at the top, immediately checking her injuries while keeping watch for the armed men searching the area. Michael made 3 more trips, Emma's mother, then her father, then the elderly couple from the pickup truck. Each rescue was more dangerous than the last, as the damaged structure continued to deteriorate. But it was during the final evacuation, bringing up Rick Santos, that everything went wrong. As Michael and Rick reached the edge of the intact portion of the bridge, they found themselves face to face with Harrison Webb himself, flanked by 2 armed security contractors. Harrison was younger than Michael had expected, maybe 45, with the kind of polished appearance that suggested boardrooms and political fundraisers. "Mr. Barnes," Webb said conversationally, as if they were meeting at a coffee shop instead of a disaster zone. "You've caused us quite a bit of trouble tonight." Michael realized with growing horror that this entire rescue operation had been orchestrated from the beginning. The earthquake, the timing, even his presence here, none of it was coincidental. And the man responsible for Soto Martinez's death was standing right in front of him, smiling.
"You killed the Martinez family," Michael said, the pieces finally falling into place with crystalline clarity. "You murdered Miguel Martinez to steal his research, then used it to trigger earthquakes for your fracking operations." Webb smiled, but it was the cold expression of a predator who had cornered his prey. "Miguel Martinez was brilliant, I'll give him that. His earthquake generation technology was years ahead of anything our competitors had developed. Unfortunately, he developed some inconvenient moral objections to practical applications. So you killed him, made it look like an accident, and destroyed me in the process? Actually, that was an unexpected bonus. We had planned to eliminate Miguel quietly, but when we learned he was transporting his research files that night, we saw an opportunity to remove him and destroy the evidence simultaneously. We never anticipated that the paramedic who responded would become so psychologically invested in the outcome." Michael felt Rick tense beside him, preparing for some kind of action despite his injured leg. Behind Webb, one of the armed contractors was speaking quietly into a radio, apparently coordinating with other team members. "The earthquake, tonight. You triggered it specifically to kill Morrison, Rick, and Dr. Chen." "Congressional testimony can be so inconvenient," Webb agreed, "especially when it threatens a multi-billion-dollar energy expansion program. Do you know that artificially triggered seismic events can clear drilling rights on federal land that would otherwise take years of environmental review to access? You're talking about mass murder for profit. I'm talking about economic efficiency. Do you have any idea how much money is locked up in federal land restrictions? How many jobs could be created if we could access those resources quickly and cleanly?" Amanda's voice cut through the conversation from somewhere behind Webb's men. "Michael, Morrison is awake, and he's been recording this entire conversation on his phone." Webb's expression shifted from confident to furious in an instant. "Find that phone," he snapped at his contractors. "Find it and destroy it, along with anyone who's heard this conversation." But Michael was already moving. 3 years of guilt and rage and self-doubt erupted into action as he launched himself at Webb, driving both of them toward the edge of the collapsed section. They hit the ground hard, Webb's expensive suit tearing on broken concrete as they grappled. One of the contractors raised his weapon, but Rick Santos proved that 25 years as a fire captain counted for something. Despite his injured leg, Rick tackled the gunman, sending his weapon spinning across the bridge deck. The second contractor went for Amanda and the evacuated civilians, but Dr. Chen emerged from behind a construction barrier where she had been hiding, wielding a piece of rebar like a club. Her swing caught the man across the temple, dropping him instantly. Michael and Webb rolled dangerously close to the edge of the collapse, 150 feet of empty air yawning beneath them. Webb was younger and in better shape, but Michael had 3 years of suppressed fury driving him forward. "You destroyed everything," Michael shouted, his hands finding Webb's throat. "You killed Sarah Martinez. You killed her whole family. You turned me into a broken man who couldn't save anyone." "And I'll do it again," Webb gasped back. "You think this stops anything? I have operations in 6 states, dozens of triggered events planned. You're just a pathetic ex-paramedic who couldn't save a little girl." The words hit Michael like physical blows, but instead of breaking him, it crystallized his purpose. Sarah Martinez hadn't died because he failed. She had died because Harrison Webb had murdered her family for profit. With a surge of strength born from 3 years of misdirected guilt, Michael hauled Webb back from the edge and pinned him against a construction barrier just as sirens began wailing in the distance. The real rescue teams were finally arriving, along with what sounded like a significant law enforcement response. Agent Morrison's backup apparently received his emergency signal. "It's over, Webb," Michael said, holding the businessman down until the authorities could take him into custody. "All of it. The earthquake triggers, the cover-ups, the murders. It's finished." Webb's response was a bitter laugh. "You think arresting me stops this? I'm just middle management, Barnes. There are people above me, people with real power who will never see the inside of a courtroom." "Maybe," Michael admitted, "but Sarah Martinez will see justice. And that's enough for me." As FBI agents swarmed the scene and paramedics began treating the injured civilians Michael had rescued, Agent Morrison approached with the briefcase that contained 3 years of carefully gathered evidence. "Mr. Barnes, I want you to know that your actions tonight didn't just save 6 lives. You've given us everything we need to dismantle an entire criminal network. Miguel Martinez's research, the financial records, and Webb's recorded confession, it's enough to prevent dozens of future attacks." Michael looked around at the scene, and then Chen was treated for her broken arm but was conscious and asking for her parents. Her mother and father were both stable, expected to make full recoveries. The elderly couple from the pickup truck were being transported to the hospital but were likely to survive. Rick Santos was getting his leg properly treated but was already planning his return to active duty. Dr. Chen was giving a detailed statement to federal investigators, her expertise crucial to understanding the full scope of the earthquake conspiracy. 6 people alive who should have been dead. A conspiracy exposed that would have killed hundreds more. And for the first time in 3 years, Michael Barnes felt like a paramedic again. But as the authorities led Webb away, the energy executive made one final revelation that changed everything Michael thought he understood about that night. "You want to know the real irony, Barnes? That little girl you couldn't save 3 years ago? She's not dead."
Michael froze as Webb's words hit him. "What did you say?" Webb, now in handcuffs and being led toward a police car, turned back with a malicious smile. Sarah Martinez, 7 years old, brown eyes, butterfly hair clips. You declared her dead at 11:47 p.m. on March 15th, 3 years ago. "She was dead," Michael said, his voice barely a whisper. "I couldn't find a pulse. She wasn't breathing. I tried everything." "You tried everything you knew how to do," Webb agreed. But you didn't know about the experimental drugs we had injected into her father's system. Drugs that cause temporary cardiac paralysis that mimics death. Drugs designed to make it look like Miguel died naturally in the crash, but which also affected his daughter through secondary exposure. Agent Morrison stepped forward, his face grave. Mr. Barnes, what he's telling you is that Sarah Martinez never actually died. The drug created a death-like state that fooled even medical professionals. She was recovered by Webb's people after you left the scene. Michael's legs gave out. Amanda caught him before he hit the ground, her medical training immediately recognizing the signs of shock. "Where is she?" Michael managed to ask. "Where is Sarah now?" Webb's smile widened. "Safe. Hidden. Being raised by people who understand the value of leverage. Did you really think we would kill a child when we could use her as insurance instead?" "You son of a—" Michael started forward, but Rick Santos caught his arm. "Easy, partner," Rick said. "Let the FBI handle this now. But Webb," he addressed the businessman directly, "if you've hurt that child in any way, she's been very well cared for. Private schools, medical attention, everything a growing girl needs. Of course, she believes her entire family died in the accident. She has no memory of her life before that night." Agent Morrison was already on his phone, coordinating what sounded like a massive search and rescue operation. "We'll find her, Mr. Barnes. Now that we know she's alive, we'll find her." But Michael wasn't listening anymore. His mind was reeling with the implications of what he'd just learned. For 3 years, he had carried the weight of Sarah Martinez's death, believing that his failure as a paramedic had cost an innocent child her life. The guilt had destroyed his career, his confidence, his sense of purpose. He had driven strangers around the city at night because he no longer trusted himself to save lives. And all of it, every sleepless night, every nightmare, every moment of self-doubt had been based on a lie. "She's alive," Michael whispered, and Amanda tightened her grip on his arm. "She's alive," Amanda confirmed, "and because of what you did tonight, she's going to be found and returned to what's left of her family." Michael looked around at the scene once more, seeing it now with completely different eyes. The collapsed bridge, the artificially triggered earthquake, the people he had rescued, it was all connected to Sarah Martinez, the little girl whose death had haunted him for 3 years. "Miguel Martinez had a brother," Dr. Chen said, approaching them with her phone in hand. "I just spoke with Agent Morrison's team. Sarah has an uncle in California who's been searching for her since the accident. He never believed the official story about the crash." As the immediate chaos of arrests and medical treatment continued around them, Michael found himself sitting on the curb next to Amanda, watching the sun begin to rise over the city. The earthquake had lasted less than 2 minutes, but the aftermath would ripple through dozens of lives for years to come. "So what happens now?" Amanda asked. Michael considered the question. 6 hours ago, he was a broken man driving an Uber to make rent money, convinced that he was too damaged to ever save lives again. Now he was sitting next to a brilliant ICU nurse, having just prevented a terrorist attack and exposed the conspiracy that had killed dozens of people across multiple states. "Now I get my life back. I get Sarah back, and I stop running from who I'm supposed to be." Agent Morrison approached them, moving slowly due to his injuries, but walking under his own power. "Mr. Barnes, I want you to know that the FBI is going to need your testimony in this case. Webb's organization had tentacles in 6 states and at least 3 federal agencies. This investigation is going to take months, possibly years. Whatever you need. But my first priority is Sarah Martinez." "Understood. And Mr. Barnes, what you did tonight, the rescues, exposing the conspiracy, keeping that evidence safe, it's going to save a lot of lives. Miguel Martinez would be proud." As the morning wore on, Michael learned more details about the scope of Webb's operation. Cascade Industries had been artificially triggering minor earthquakes for 3 years, targeting specific geological areas that would allow them to circumvent environmental regulations on federal drilling permits. The Martinez family had been their first victims, but they had caused at least 6 other natural disasters that resulted in dozens of deaths and hundreds of millions in property damage.
But the operation was finished now. Webb's recorded confession, combined with Miguel Martinez's original research files and 3 years of financial records, provided enough evidence to dismantle the entire network. Federal authorities were already coordinating arrests in 4 other states. Most importantly, the search for Sara Martinez had begun in earnest. Using Webb's corporate records and financial transactions, FBI teams had identified several possible locations where she might be hidden. Agent Morrison was confident they would find her within days, not weeks. 2 months later, Michael Barnes stood in the lobby of Phoenix Children's Hospital wearing a paramedic uniform for the first time in 3 years. He was nervous, his first day back on the job since the bridge incident, but it was a different kind of nervousness than he had felt before. This was the anticipation of someone who finally understood her purpose in life. "Ready for this?" Amanda asked. She had taken a position at the same hospital, working in the pediatric ICU. Their relationship had grown slowly and naturally from the shared trauma of that night on the bridge, built on mutual respect and understanding rather than dramatic romance. "Ready as I'll ever be," Michael replied. The elevator doors opened and Sara Martinez stepped out, thanked by her uncle Carlos and a social worker. She was 10 now, taller and older, but Michael recognized her immediately. The same brown eyes, the same shy smile, though she no longer wore butterfly hair clips. "Mr. Michael?" she said tentatively. "Uncle Carlos told me you were the paramedic who tried to help my family that night." "I was, Sara. And I want you to know that I never stopped thinking about you, never stopped wishing I could have done more." "Uncle Carlos says you're the reason they found me. He says you're a hero." "No," Michael said gently. "You're the hero, Sara. You survived something terrible, and you're stronger because of it. And now, you get to have the life your father wanted for you." Sara smiled and hugged him, and for the first time in 3 years, Michael Barnes felt complete. The little girl he thought he had failed to save had actually saved him instead. She had given him a reason to become the man he was always meant to be. Someone who runs toward danger instead of away from it, someone who saves lives instead of just driving around them, and someone who understands that being a hero isn't about never failing, it's about never giving up. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get a second chance to save the person who needed saving all along, yourself.
But the story Michael thought had ended was only beginning. 3 days after his emotional reunion with Sara Martinez, Agent Morrison called with news that sent chills down his spine. "We found Webb's operational headquarters," Morrison said over the phone. "Michael, you need to see this. Can you meet me at the FBI field office this afternoon?" Michael arrived at the federal building to find Morrison looking haggard, surrounded by boxes of evidence and computer monitors displaying what appeared to be geological surveys and financial documents. "What did you find?" Michael asked. Morrison gestured to a wall-mounted display showing a map of the western United States dotted with red pins. Each pin represents an artificially triggered seismic event over the past 5 years. "We initially thought Webb's operation was limited to 6 incidents. We were wrong. There have been 43 confirmed artificial earthquakes, Michael. 43. The scope of it was staggering. Michael studied the map, seeing patterns emerge in the placement of the pins. "They're all near federal land boundaries," he observed. "Exactly. And here's the really disturbing part. Webb wasn't the mastermind. He was middle management, just like he said. The real operation is run by something called the Geological Assets Recovery Coalition, or GARC. It's a consortium of energy companies, defense contractors, and investment firms that have been systematically triggering disasters to manipulate land rights and federal drilling permits." Morrison pulled up another display showing financial transactions. In the past 5 years, GARC has generated over $12 billion in revenue from drilling rights that were obtained through artificially created emergency situations. When a natural disaster strikes federal land, environmental protections are temporarily suspended to allow for recovery efforts. GARC exploits that window to begin extraction operations before the protections can be reinstated. Michael felt sick. How many people have died? Confirmed casualties from the 43 events, 237 dead, over 1,000 injured. And those are just the direct victims. When you factor in the long-term health effects of communities exposed to unregulated drilling chemicals, Morrison shook his head. We're talking about one of the largest mass casualty conspiracies in American history. And they're still operational? That's the problem. Webb's arrest has spooked them, but it hasn't shut them down. Our intelligence suggests they're accelerating their timeline, trying to trigger as many profitable disasters as possible before we can stop them. Morrison led Michael to another computer terminal displaying seismic monitoring data. Dr. Chen has been analyzing recent underground activity. She's identified at least 6 locations where GARC appears to be preparing for major artificial events. The largest is scheduled for the San Andreas fault system. Michael's blood ran cold. The San Andreas? That could affect millions of people. The projected casualty estimate for an artificially triggered major earthquake along the San Andreas is between 50 and 70,000 deaths, with economic damage exceeding $200 billion. But it would also open up drilling access to some of the largest untapped oil reserves in North America. When? Based on the seismic preparation patterns Dr. Chen has identified, sometime in the next 72 hours. Michael stared at the data, his paramedic mind automatically calculating the medical response requirements for a disaster of that magnitude. The existing emergency infrastructure wouldn't be able to handle even a fraction of the casualties. Hospitals would be overwhelmed within hours, and the disruption to transportation networks would prevent effective evacuation. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "We're putting together a joint task force with the FBI, ATF, and U.S. Geological Survey to locate and neutralize GARC's trigger facilities. But Michael, these aren't just industrial sabotage sites. They're military-grade installations with professional security teams. We need someone who understands emergency response, who can help coordinate rescue operations if something goes wrong." Michael thought about Sarah Martinez, finally safe with her uncle, but still recovering from 3 years of psychological manipulation. He thought about the families he had rescued from the bridge, and the hundreds of other families who would never get that chance if GARC succeeded in their final operation. "I'm in," he said, "but I want Amanda Foster on the medical response team. If we're going into a potential disaster zone, we need the best emergency medical personnel available." Morrison nodded. Already arranged. Dr. Chen specifically requested her inclusion based on her performance during the bridge incident. Over the next 18 hours, Michael found himself part of an operation unlike anything he had experienced even during his paramedic days. The task force assembled at Edwards Air Force Base included FBI tactical teams, ATF explosives experts, USGS seismologists, and emergency medical personnel from across California. Dr. Chen briefed the assembled team on GARC's earthquake generation technology, which had evolved significantly beyond Miguel Martinez's original research. They're using a combination of high-pressure chemical injection and precisely timed explosive charges to destabilize specific fault segments. The process requires months of preparation and involves drilling injection wells at precise locations along the fault line. Amanda, who'd been flown in from Phoenix that morning, studied satellite imagery of the suspected trigger sites. If they succeed in creating a major artificial earthquake, the medical response is going to be unlike anything we've ever dealt with. We're talking about trauma cases on a scale that could overwhelm every hospital from Los Angeles to San Francisco. The primary suspected trigger facility was located in a remote area of the Mojave Desert, approximately 40 miles from a major population center. Satellite surveillance showed a compound that appeared to be a legitimate geological research station, complete with drilling equipment and scientific monitoring gear. "The problem," explained FBI Tactical Commander Captain Jennifer Walsh, "is that we don't know how stable their trigger system is. If we approach too aggressively and spook them, they might activate the earthquake prematurely as a defensive measure." "And if we don't approach aggressively enough," Dr. Chen added, "they complete their timeline and trigger the earthquake anyway." Michael studied the tactical plans, his emergency response experience helping him identify potential problems. "What's the evacuation plan for the surrounding area?" "That's the challenge," Captain Walsh admitted. "A full evacuation would alert GARC to our presence and could trigger early activation.
But if we don't evacuate and something goes wrong, how many people are we talking about? Approximately 15,000 in the immediate danger zone, another 150,000 in the secondary impact area. Michael felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders, but this time it came with something else: confidence. The bridge incident had proven to him that he could still save lives when it mattered most. Now he was being asked to help save more lives than he had ever imagined possible. We need a hybrid approach: covert evacuation disguised as routine emergency preparedness exercises. We can move the most vulnerable populations, children, elderly, people with medical conditions, under the pretense of disaster readiness drills. It won't get everyone out, but it reduces the casualty potential if something goes wrong. Amanda nodded in agreement. I can coordinate with local hospitals to position additional medical resources without triggering suspicion. Frame it as a multi-agency training exercise. Dr. Chen was already working on her laptop, pulling up geological survey data. I can provide scientific justification for increased seismic monitoring in the area. If GARC sees federal geological teams setting up additional sensors, they'll assume it's routine fault line surveillance. Captain Walsh looked impressed. All right, we have the framework for approach strategy. Timeline is 36 hours until Dr. Chen's projected activation window. We move in phases: surveillance and positioning tonight, evacuation preparation tomorrow morning, tactical intervention tomorrow evening. As the briefing broke up and team members began their specific preparations, Morrison pulled Michael aside. There's something else you need to know, something we discovered in Webb's files that we haven't shared with the full team yet. What is it?
Morrison handed him a thick folder. Personnel records for GARC's security operations. Michael, the head of their tactical team, is someone you know. Michael opened the folder and felt the blood drain from his face. The personnel file contained a photograph and service record for Captain Marcus Webb, Harrison Webb's younger brother, a former Army Ranger who had been dishonorably discharged 3 years ago for unauthorized use of military equipment. But it wasn't the family connection that made Michael's hands shake. It was the incident report attached to Marcus Webb's discharge paperwork. 3 years ago, Captain Marcus Webb had been stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado, when he was caught selling military-grade explosives to civilian contractors. The investigation had revealed that the explosives were used in what appeared to be a mining accident that killed 12 people. The mining accident had occurred on March 15th, the same night Miguel Martinez and his family were killed on Highway 60. Jesus, Michael whispered. Marcus Webb was involved in the original Phoenix incident? We think he was the one who planted the devices that caused Miguel's car to crash, Morrison confirmed. And now he's running security for GARC's final operation. Michael, this isn't just about stopping a terrorist attack. It's about confronting the people who destroyed your life 3 years ago. Michael stared at the photograph of Marcus Webb, memorizing the face of the man who had murdered Sarah Martinez's family. Tomorrow he would have the chance to prevent those same people from killing thousands more innocent victims. But he would also be walking into a confrontation with the ghosts of his past, and this time there would be no second chances for anyone. The man who had orchestrated Sarah Martinez's family's death was now running security for the largest terrorist operation in American history, and Michael Barnes was about to walk into his stronghold with only 36 hours to prevent a disaster that would make 9/11 look like a minor incident. The desert compound looked innocuous enough in the pre-dawn darkness, a collection of prefabricated buildings, drilling equipment, and scientific monitoring stations that could have been any legitimate geological research facility. But Michael knew better now. Behind the facade of scientific research was a sophisticated earthquake generation system capable of killing tens of thousands of people. Michael lay prone on a rocky outcrop half a mile from the compound, studying the facility through night vision binoculars alongside FBI Tactical Commander Captain Walsh. Amanda was positioned with the mobile medical unit 2 miles back, ready to respond if the tactical operation went wrong. Dr. Chen was monitoring seismic activity from a command vehicle, tracking the underground systems that GARC was using to prepare their artificial earthquake. Guard rotation every 30 minutes, Captain Walsh observed quietly into her radio. Standard security protocols, nothing that suggests we're here. But Michael's attention was focused on the main compound building, where he could see figures moving behind lit windows. According to their intelligence, Marcus Webb was inside that building, coordinating the final stages of the San Andreas trigger operation. Dr. Chen's voice crackled through their earpieces. Seismic monitoring shows they're in final preparation phase. Chemical injection systems are at maximum pressure, and I'm detecting microtremors consistent with fault destabilization. If they activate the trigger charges, we're looking at a magnitude 7.8 earthquake within 2 hours. Copy that, Captain Walsh responded. All teams, we are go for tactical approach. The plan was complex but necessary. 3 FBI tactical teams would simultaneously disable the security systems, neutralize the guard force, and prevent access to the earthquake trigger controls. Michael and a small medical team would follow behind to provide emergency treatment for any casualties, both GARC personnel and task force members. But Michael had his own objective. Harrison Webb's files had contained detailed plans for GARC's earthquake operations, including fail-safe systems designed to trigger the disasters automatically if the facilities were compromised. The only way to permanently disable the San Andreas operation was to access the central control system, which required both electronic override codes and biometric authentication from senior GARC leadership. In other words, they needed Marcus Webb alive and cooperative. The tactical assault began with the precision of a surgical operation. FBI tactical teams moved through the compound's perimeter defenses like shadows, using electronic countermeasures to disable alarm systems and communications equipment. The guards were neutralized with non-lethal weapons before they could raise an alert. Michael followed the lead team into the main facility, his medical gear feeling strangely inadequate compared to the tactical equipment surrounding him. The building's interior was more sophisticated than he had expected. Banks of computer servers, geological monitoring equipment, and control systems that belonged in a NASA mission control room rather than a desert research station. They found Marcus Webb in the central control room, along with 3 other GARC technicians who were frantically trying to activate the earthquake trigger system as FBI agents swarmed the facility. "Step away from the controls," Captain Walsh shouted, her weapon trained on Webb. Marcus Webb was younger than his brother Harrison, maybe 35, with the lean build and cold eyes of a professional soldier. He looked up from the console with the expression of someone who had expected this moment. "Agent Walsh, I presume. You're too late. The earthquake sequence is already active. In approximately 90 minutes, the San Andreas Fault will experience a magnitude 7.8 artificial earthquake that will kill more people than any single disaster in American history." "Shut it down," Walsh ordered. Webb smiled. "I'm afraid that's not possible. The system is designed to prevent tampering once the final activation sequence begins. Even if I wanted to stop it, which I don't, the controls are locked until the earthquake occurs." Dr. Chen's voice crackled through their earpieces. "He's telling the truth. Seismic readings show the fault system is already destabilizing beyond normal parameters. The artificial earthquake is going to happen regardless of what we do here." Michael stepped forward, studying Webb's face and remembering everything he knew about the Martinez family murders. "You killed Miguel Martinez and his family. You destroyed my career and my life because I couldn't save a little girl who was actually still alive." Miguel Martinez was a bleeding heart idealist who didn't understand the economic potential of his own research, and you were just collateral damage, a paramedic who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. "But Sarah Martinez survived. Your plan failed." For the first time, Webb's composure slipped slightly. "A minor operational oversight. The drug dosage calculations were imprecise for a child her size, but the net result was the same. Miguel's research became available for practical applications. I felt the familiar surge of protective rage that had driven me to rescue 6 people from the collapsed bridge, but this time I channeled it into something more focused. Dr. Chen, if the earthquake system can't be shut down from here, where can it be stopped? The primary fault injection points. There should be 6 to 8 drilling sites positioned along the fault line where the chemical injection and explosive systems are located. If we could disrupt those systems before the earthquake sequence completes."
How long do we have? Based on current seismic readings, maybe 60 minutes before the fault reaches critical instability. Captain Walsh was already coordinating with other task force units. We have helicopter teams en route to the injection sites, but it's going to be close. The sites are spread across 40 miles of desert terrain. Michael looked at Marcus Webb, who was watching the tactical coordination with obvious amusement. You planned for this contingency, didn't you? You knew that even if we found the control facility, we might not be able to stop the individual injection sites in time. Gark has been planning this operation for 3 years, Webb confirmed. Every possible interference scenario has been accounted for. The San Andreas earthquake will occur exactly as scheduled. But Michael was studying the control room displays, his paramedic experience helping him understand the biological parallel between Gark's earthquake system and the human cardiovascular system he had spent years trying to repair. Dr. Chen, the injection sites work like a coordinated system, right? They have to trigger in a specific sequence to create the artificial earthquake. That's correct. It's similar to cardiac defibrillation. Precise timing and coordination are essential for effectiveness. Michael turned back to Marcus Webb. What happens if one of the injection sites fails, if the timing sequence gets disrupted? Webb's expression shifted from amusement to concern. The system has redundancies, but not unlimited redundancies, Michael pressed. If enough injection sites go offline, the artificial earthquake fails. Instead of a coordinated 7.8 magnitude disaster, you get a series of smaller, uncoordinated tremors that dissipate naturally. Dr. Chen's voice carried new hope. Michael's right. If we can disable at least half of the injection sites, the fault system will restabilize naturally. The artificial earthquake will fail. Captain Walsh was already updating her tactical teams. All units, priority target shift. We need to disable 4 injection sites minimum within the next 45 minutes. As FBI teams raced across the desert to prevent a disaster that would reshape the American West Coast, Michael found himself alone with Marcus Webb while the other Gark technicians were processed for arrest. You want to know the real irony? Webb said quietly. Everything that happened to you, everything that destroyed your life, it was all unnecessary. We could have stolen Miguel's research without killing anyone. The murders, the cover-up, turning you into a broken man who couldn't save lives, none of it was required for our operation. Then why? Because my brother Harrison enjoys the psychological manipulation almost as much as the profit. Destroying people is a hobby for him. Breaking a dedicated paramedic who was trying to save lives, that was just entertainment. Michael felt something shift inside him, a final release of the guilt and self-doubt that had defined his life for 3 years. You made one mistake, though. What's that? You didn't actually break me. You just convinced me I was broken. Tonight, I'm going to help save more lives than I ever could have saved as a paramedic. And your operation is going to fail because you underestimated the people you tried to destroy. Webb's radio crackled with reports from the injection sites. One by one, FBI tactical teams were successfully disabling the earthquake generation equipment. The artificial San Andreas earthquake was failing exactly as Dr. Chen had predicted. By dawn, it was over. Gark's earthquake generation network had been dismantled. 43 people had been arrested across 6 states, and the San Andreas fault had restabilized without artificial intervention. Michael Barnes had helped prevent the largest terrorist attack in American history. But more importantly, he had finally put the ghosts of Phoenix to rest. The terrorist plot was stopped and Marcus Webb was in custody, but Michael's story was still not over, because in the chaos of preventing a massive earthquake, no one had noticed that Sarah Martinez wasn't the only child who had been kidnapped and hidden by Gark. There were others, and finding them would require Michael to make one final choice about who he wanted to be. 1 week after the Gark operation, Michael was back in Phoenix, officially reinstated as a paramedic and preparing for his first shift in 3 years. The media attention had been overwhelming. News outlets were calling him the Uber hero who had prevented a catastrophic earthquake. But Michael was more interested in the quiet satisfaction of returning to work that actually saved lives. He was reviewing equipment protocols when Agent Morrison appeared in the ambulance bay carrying a folder that had become depressingly familiar. "Michael, we need to talk. We've been going through Gark's operational files in more detail, and we've found something else." Michael looked up from his equipment check. "Please tell me it's good news for once." "It depends on how you define good news.
We've found records indicating that Sarah Martinez wasn't the only child who had been kidnapped and hidden by GARC. Over the past 5 years, they've been systematically taking children from families they've targeted for elimination. How many children? 17 that we can confirm, ages ranging from 4 to 12 when they were taken. They've been scattered across multiple foster networks and private facilities, all with false identities and manufactured histories. Influenced how? Psychological manipulation, educational programming, preparation for eventual recruitment. They were creating the next generation of GARC operatives using children who had no memory of their original lives. Michael studied the photographs, seeing faces ranging from preschoolers to teenagers, all of whom had been stolen from families that thought they were dead. Where are they now? That's the problem. GARC's foster network was designed to be virtually impossible to trace. The children were moved regularly, their identities changed multiple times, and their care providers often unaware of their true origins. Finding them is going to require a massive coordinated effort across multiple states. And you want my help. Morrison nodded. You understand the psychological trauma these children have experienced. You know how to approach victims who may not even know they're victims. And frankly, you're the person who brought down GARC. These kids' families would want you involved in bringing them home. Michael thought about Sarah Martinez, still adjusting to life with her uncle Carlos, still processing the reality that her entire childhood had been built on lies. Multiply that trauma by 17, and the scope of the recovery operation is staggering. What kind of timeline are we looking at?
Months, possibly years. Some of these children have been missing for so long that they may not have any memory of their original families. Others might resist rescue efforts because they've been conditioned to believe their current lives are normal. Amanda appeared in the ambulance bay, having just finished her shift in the pediatric ICU. Are you talking about the other GARC children? Michael looked at her in surprise. You know about them? Dr. Chen briefed me yesterday. They want medical professionals involved in the recovery operation who understand both trauma treatment and the specific psychological patterns GARC used in their manipulation programs. Morrison opened another section of his folder. We're putting together a specialized task force, FBI investigators, child psychologists, medical professionals, and people with direct experience confronting GARC operations. The goal is to locate and recover all 17 children while providing them with the support they'll need to rebuild their lives. Michael realized that the choice Morrison was offering him wasn't just about helping recover kidnapped children. It was about defining what kind of person he wanted to be going forward. He could return to his comfortable life as a Phoenix paramedic, saving lives one emergency call at a time, or he could take on a challenge that would require everything he had learned from his own trauma and recovery. How long do I have to decide? The task force launches Monday morning. If you're going to be involved, we need to know by tomorrow. That evening, Michael sat in his apartment, looking at the commendation certificate the city had given him for his role in the bridge rescue. 3 months ago, he had been a broken man driving strangers around the city because he no longer trusted himself to save lives. Now, he was being asked to help save 17 children from a conspiracy that had already destroyed too many families. His phone rang. It was Sarah Martinez. "Mr. Michael?" she said in her 10-year-old voice. "Uncle Carlos said you're thinking about helping find other kids like me. Kids who got taken away from their families." "That's right, Sarah. How do you feel about that?" "I think you should do it. Because if someone had been looking for me all those years, maybe I wouldn't have forgotten so much about my mommy and daddy. Maybe I could have come home sooner." Michael closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 17 lost childhoods and the families who had never stopped searching for them. "Sarah, do you remember what your father used to tell you about helping people? He said that if you can help someone and you don't, then part of the hurt becomes yours to carry forever." Michael smiled, recognizing the wisdom of Miguel Martinez even in the words of his daughter. "Your father was a smart man. So, you'll help find them?" Michael looked around his apartment, at the life he had rebuilt from the ashes of his broken career, at the future he had finally started to believe in again. "Yes," he said. "I'll help find them. All of them. Because that's what heroes do, not because they're fearless, but because they understand that some things are more important than fear. Like children who need to come home. Like families who never stopped hoping. Like the belief that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when it matters most." Michael Barnes had spent 3 years running from his past. Now he was ready to run toward a future
where lost children could find their way home, where broken families could heal, and where the damage done by evil people could be repaired by those who choose to stand against the darkness. It was, he realized, exactly the kind of work a hero would do.
Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss these. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe.